Anyway, so liquid glass. Picking up right where we
Nice.
left off yesterday.
Yep. I like it. It's like there was a cliffhanger that we went away for the summer. You come back,
Yep.
liquid glass. Yep. What do you got?
I
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. I'm Stardock's gonna send a mailer. It says if you want to bring liquid glass to Windows 11, we have a great window blind skin that's called Arrow 11 that kind of does
Yeah.
this.
It's so yeah, I mean when I just remember this stuff, right? So Mac OS 10,
Mm-hmm.
translucent menus and other
Yep.
effects. It had kind of a weird, like ribbed, kind of white with light blue ribbing, like UI on the
Mm-hmm.
behind the toolbars. But anyway, people forget this stuff. So the idea was this that you could kind of see the windows below through the
Yeah.
edges or whatever, and it was really terrible at first. I mean, they got it right eventually, but it made everything look really muddy and it was just really bad. And so several years later, when Microsoft finally put out Windows Vista and did this with Arrow, I was like, well, they have this experience to work off of. And no, they did the same thing. It was all screwed up. So, and of course, there were the problems with integrated graphics cards and all that stuff.
I was
But
gonna say that was least of Vista's
yeah, but the
flaws.
promise there was always that you have so much graphical power in
Mm-hmm.
your computer now that you can offload this display from the CPU, and the overall impact on your system will be less and it will look better, right? And I think most people would hold up Windows 7 as an improvement to the Arrow stuff and maybe a cleaner, better looking version or whatever. But then they got rid of it because, as it turns out, it's actually way easier to draw. It's flat 2D graphics, Brad.
Mm.
Transparencies are hard. So flash forward whatever it is years, and I put this beta on every one of my Apple devices. So I have iPad, iPhone,
Yep.
watch,
Yep.
TV. Feel like I'm missing one. Mac, right? And yeah, they're making the same mistakes. I mean, look, it's early, it's still a beta, so there are a lot of videos and images of people trying to scroll over some content, and the glass control just gets obliterated because you can't see anything. And control center is particularly bad on the iPhone, I guess. Um, but I look. There are adaptive UI things occurring there that I think are awesome. Like in Safari on the phone, when you scroll up, the little toolbar thing kind of goes down to a little pill and then
Yep.
disappears, and you can kind of see the stuff. And then when you touch the screen again, it kind of comes back. And I think that's cool. It doesn't require glass or whatever, but it's also it's just a fake bitmap effect. Which I don't like. And I last night or yesterday sometime I was doing something on the Mac, and the when you have widgets on the desktop, they kind of fade when you
Mm-hmm.
have an application window or whatever open on top of it. And there's a crappy glass effect. It's supposed to show a reflection. It's the type of unsophisticated light source nonsense that Microsoft put in Windows 95 back in the day. So speaking of things people don't remember, for all of the stuff that changed in Windows 95, one of the big deals was Microsoft was like, look, we're going to make all of the controls consistent, meaning that you'll have a button and there are these four sides, and the two on the one on the top and the one on the left for me, for you, is going to be light. And then the other two are going to be dark, and that will give it a 3D look, and that effect will always be consistent. It's always coming from that side. And that's what Apple's doing. It's the same thing. It's just they're like slightly curved. They just look like crap. Like it's terrible. So there's parts of it I like. The liquid glass part is what I don't like. Like I don't know. It's,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Now I did put the dev beta on my iPad.
Look
It's
at you. Is this a first? No, I'm serious.
well,
Like you don't
usually
usually do
usually
this.
I won't put the dev beta on a device I need to survive, which is my phone.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I have not done that. But when I was in Florida on vacation, I was like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
windowing on the iPad. This is like what we've always wanted. This is going to make the thing. I got to tell you, I put it on there and it's like, I don't know if this is it. Like,
Well,
It
Yeah.
doesn't.
So
I don't want to say Apple was right to like hold off on this, but having that functionality on an 11-inch screen, it's not that great.
yeah, the one thing I give them credit for is, think about Windows 8, and we're just gonna go back in time every time I say anything.
Mhm.
And full screen, it's just
Yeah.
full screen. We're just doing full screen apps, and in time it became more sophisticated, and then in time we just got rid of that crap because it was terrible. But whatever. Um, Apple at least is giving you this choice. You boot it up, you saw the
Yep.
screen, it says you can do it the old way or the new way, whatever. Most people using an iPad, I think, will be better served by the old way, right?
I
That
actually agree
includes
with it.
me,
Yeah.
right? I mean, yeah. So I've always wanted them to do this, but I also realized that for this to make sense, I need a bigger device than the one that I have right now, for
Yep.
example. So like a or iPad mini, or an 11-inch iPad like the one I have now. Yeah, it's just, it's not quite there. Plus, you want the integrated keyboard cover thing with the touchpad and all that stuff, and I don't have one of those either. So,
I do.
okay,
That
interesting.
that was the
So,
whole point. Is like I'm taking this instead of using a laptop
yeah,
for even though I did still take a laptop. I didn't
yeah,
turn it on though, but because regardless of me having a vacation, there's still things of work that I have to do,
yeah, of course, of
or
course.
answer whatever.
Yep.
And so iPad was fine for that. But like just logically speaking, so you put email in like a little window or whatever, like it's still 11-inch display. So now you just have like this smaller
Yeah,
version of your
it's not.
like it doesn't that does not work.
Yeah. So, first of all, no one has been writing apps to take advantage of this.
Yep.
Most of the apps you would run on an iPad don't make sense in that way. I mean, even something as simple as like side by side view, where you might have like a web browser and a note taking app, like that's fine. Like it's you don't really, do you really need the ability to do that kind of stuff? No, most times no. But if you think about a 13-inch or maybe later a bigger device, there's a folding one coming, which
Mm-hmm.
might have been the trigger for this.
Oh yeah.
Um, with that amount of real estate, maybe, but even on the Mac, I find like I use most apps full screen, and they have really nice swipe gestures, and that
Yep.
stuff works fine. I, in some ways, the bigger deal is that, well, there's two bigger deals. One is background processes, humongous, right?
Right.
This
That
is the
is.
classic example. Like, so there'll be certain, and it's not going to be free for all. Like it has to be a certain type of app, like a video renderer type thing. Classic, right? Good. Um, but honestly, I think it's more like just respecting the fact that files exist and certain apps need to use those files, and you might want to open them with that app. Like that's part of it now. I think that's important. Um, but I think when you think about like a Surface Pro or any kind of a Windows tablet, my issue with those devices is that 99 times out of 100, you don't need the touch. You don't need the drawing pen thing. You don't. Like some people do. I know.
Mm-hmm.
I respect it, but most people don't. So it makes more sense to kind of optimize this for the clamshell form factor, laptop, whatever. Um, an iPad though is approaching it from that tablet point of view. And of course, they have a really good ecosystem for that stuff. So the thing you just described, like you're away, but you actually do have to catch up on work. You don't need the floating windows, but the reason you have the keyboard case is because you might want to write an email
Mm-hmm.
or whatever, and that stuff works better. So with that device, with that stuff. So like that didn't change, but you there's a preview app now for looking at PDFs. There's the file system changes. There's the background processes. Like there's all these like other things that I think are actually super useful. So I'm excited they made this thing. I think for a lot of mainstream users, this could now replace a laptop. Like this is what was missing. Not floating windows necessarily, but the other stuff, right? Um, but I'm more like, and you and I both, I think we're more, it's like what we would have called a workstation back in the day, or the whole
Yeah.
car truck conversation like Steve Jobs introduced. Um, I like bigger screens, I like hardware keyboards. I like,
You like
but
big screens and you cannot lie.
exactly. But I was just talking to Stephen Rose. He said something very similar. Not, we weren't talking about floating windows and stuff, but he was on vacation and he said, I bring an iPad. I don't bring a laptop. And I was like, that is fascinating to me. Like I would never travel I wouldn't go away for a weekend without a laptop. Like
Yeah.
I couldn't even function. But maybe this is what changes that, right? Plus, more sophisticated apps will now be written because it can do those things.
Yeah, yeah, we'll see. Um,
What do you think of the glass stuff, though? What's your take on that?
on the what stuff?
The glass, the liquid glass,
Oh, eh,
like almost non-existent. You know?
it it needs work. Um,
Yeah,
like they were so high on themselves that when you hover over text or whatever, like the occlusion effect, which
yeah,
to me is actually, this is where my brain goes. It's like proving Einstein's theory of relativity when there's a light source behind a black hole, how the lensing effect,
right, right.
like that's what I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And then I used it as like, that's really annoying. Um,
There
because
are too many times for me where you put your finger on something and you vaguely see something is
yeah,
happening down there, but your finger's blocking it. So you kind of look around, you're like looking at it, you're like, why is it animating? Like, what is the like? What's it doing?
yeah. And then you slide it around and
Yeah,
it just
yeah,
feels like they added animations for the sake of animations.
right.
Not, don't get me wrong, there's definitely like a polish to it, right? It's like, oh, that's kind of cool or whatever, but like it feels like they got to that point and they're like, we can do more, and then they just kept adding things. Like the fact that there's inertia within the text selection tool, the little glass bubble annoys the hell out of me. Like I want to turn it off.
So yeah, you can turn that off, by
Okay,
the
good.
way.
I need to find that
You
option.
have to go into accessibility,
Of
but
course.
there's a yeah, you can turn this stuff off. And I I don't know. I to me the weird one is so I tested it and I was like, holy crap, they did it. This is kind of amazing. Like I figured over time this was going to happen, but they would, Apple, right? They do like one part of it now and then the
Hmm.
next one next. The fact that they just dumped the whole thing on us was like that's more on Apple than pre-announcing Apple Intelligence in my mind. But okay, they did it. But of
Which,
course, I
by the
left
way,
it
they
like
did a wonderful job of dodging all of the, hey, we said all these things are going to happen, and they're still happening, but they're just not here yet. Give us another year mentality.
I got it. I
Oh
meant
God,
to
dude,
do this.
we got to change
I,
topics.
I know what you're
This
gonna say. Hold on, wait. We'll get to that in 1 second. Just real quick. You
totally
talk about
remind me.
the Xbox handheld gaming thing,
No,
right?
God, no,
No, oh God. Okay,
no,
well,
no,
one
no,
second
no,
then.
no, no. This is so much
Hold on.
bigger than that. This is so much bigger.
Hold on. Let me just finish this thought. Let me just get this to put this aside because the downside of the window thing is now things are in Windows for me and I don't know why. So like when I run YouTube music,
Hmm.
it's taking up most of the screen. And I've been trying to resize it and do the thing and it just like it won't go back. Anyway,
The
what's big?
OpenAI and Microsoft are,
Yeah, falling apart as we always knew they
dude.
would.
There will not be enough oxygen in this room if OpenAI tries to rug pull Microsoft on this. I will be laughing so hard, and
Uh,
like,
Microsoft has the power over OpenAI that China has over Apple. So we just talked about that
I
yesterday.
know.
Microsoft could be like, "Oh, you know that cute little startup you just thought you were going to buy for 180 million bucks or whatever it was? Yeah, you're not doing it. We have the right to say no to that." And they actually, I guess this is one of the points. Like they went to him and said, "No, we have one of these things. It's called GitHub Copilot. We don't need another one."
So
And I'm sure,
I think
they're like, "But we need
OpenAI
one."
has realized that they signed the deal with the devil
Yeah,
when they took all that money from Microsoft. Because now, according to what is it, the information saying that OpenAI is trying to restructure itself, and they offered Microsoft 33% of the company.
right.
33%. Now we both know Microsoft can't buy OpenAI. Like there's too much legal frameworks that are going to get in the way, and it'll never close. Although I guarantee they would have if they wouldn't have bought Activision. They probably would have tried. Set that aside. Set that aside. So apparently these two
Yeah.
companies are now butting heads in a very real way because I think OpenAI realized like, hey, we don't actually need Microsoft anymore. We have a viable business. We have a roadmap. And Paul just froze. That's how much Microsoft is hated by.
Yeah, unfortunately,
Uh-oh.
we just
You
sorry,
froze
that
there for a second.
froze
The
there.
AI is listening.
Anyway, Microsoft also has the power to prevent OpenAI from restructuring in
Yes,
a way it does not like.
correct.
You know, Microsoft is angling to get control of more of the company than
Yep.
33%. It's crazy.
It
Like, but
is.
this was I've been saying ever since the Sam Altman thing, which was, by the way, like almost 2 years ago now. Is that possible?
Oh my gosh. Really?
Right? A year
Yeah.
and a half ago. I'm like, this is ending badly. And every once in a while, there will be Microsoft has restructured 3 times around AI, and it's involved outside hires every time.
Mm-hmm.
which is like, what is going on at this company? Like the guy who did I don't even know his name. I'm so sorry, but the guy who did the Microsoft Build Day 2 keynote, who looks like exactly like Satya Nadella from the back, because I was sitting behind him at the Sunday night event before Build started, and then he stood up, and I was like, oh, that's not Satya Nadella. Anyway, he was an outside hire. Mustafa Suleiman, obviously outside hire, caused a bunch of people to be like, yeah, I'm not working for this guy. Also, people inside Microsoft who are like, what about us? What are
Yeah.
we doing? You know? So I don't know. Kevin Scott made this thing happen. He's been a lot more aggressive about getting himself out there in recent years, by the way, which we've all seen because you've seen him. You never saw him before. You didn't even know who he was. Scott Guthrie, supposed to be in charge of a lot of this stuff. That stuff's moving around too. Now he's still around. And, you know, one day, I mean, at one point he had to have been on a short list for possible CEO, right? I don't know what's going on there either. I mean, it's
Microsoft is so attached to the hip to OpenAI. They try to make it sound like they're not. Every time, like, look, we support this in Azure AI Foundry and all that stuff. Yeah,
right.
That's
well, the one thing they do have. I mean, look, they do have this agreement. So, if OpenAI and Microsoft somehow broke up tomorrow, they still get to use everything that they have from OpenAI. You know, they've been able to train their own stuff and build their own things. You can look at what DeepSeek did, and everyone's like, "Oh, they cheated." And it's like, no, this is how you build models.
Yeah.
You know, like they showed you how to do it. I'm sure Microsoft is doing this or has already been doing it with the OpenAI models to make its own, right? I mean, why wouldn't you do this? Distill models and whatever. Microsoft releases a new model every 10 seconds, just like every other company doing this stuff right now. So
yeah, but we're getting to the point where the models just don't matter. Now I say that in a very loaded statement, that it's the average user is like, I'm already using ChatGPT. I'm not switching, right? They've got that inertia that is so
this
hard
is
to
actually
capture.
this is in some ways OpenAI's greatest strength is the brand somehow.
It is.
Like they are, I think I've said this before, but they are to AI what Chrome is to browsers. Like they have gotten people that have a default that works fine to go use it to download their thing and then use that instead. This goes against the every theory about the power of defaults and blah 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 whatever. So this is actually pretty rare. You know, because I know like people listening to this have their own little, like I always use VLC and not media player in Windows. Yeah. No, I get it. You do. But like normal people do this, like mainstream non-technical people with Chrome, everyone, like literally about 2/3 of everyone, I guess. Probably 3/4 if you don't count Apple people, but whatever. And then ChatGPT did this for AI. It's crazy. Like they've really, a lot of times that first brand is the one that falls apart. Like no one remembers Alta Vista and search engines, you know,
because they get stabbed in the back by somebody who's better funded,
faster, but right.
Yep.
Exactly. And man, Google's done great, honestly, but they still are perceived as not being as good. And Microsoft, I mean, the Microsoft stuff is fine. Honestly, it's fine. My wife actually, I think to this day, still she tests all the different AIs for different things. And she actually, I asked her this one time, and she goes, actually, the one that works the best is Copilot. And I'm like, what? And she was like, no one has ever said that. She goes, well, for the stuff I do, it actually is the best. And I'm like, okay. Must be those sweet, sweet Bing results. I don't know.
Yeah, but ChatGPT's, and that's the thing that they want to break out, right? More on their own trajectory, and Microsoft's like holding on to their leg, like, I don't think so.
Yeah, this is like GM trying to kill the electric car in the 90s or 80s or whatever that was.
That's not a bad
right?
analogy. Except they're not trying to kill it; they're just trying to be an amoeba and like absorb everything that they're.
Yeah, this is classic antitrust behavior, right? I mean,
well, that's what the parent like internal claims were, is like Microsoft's doing antitrust things, which the hilarious part would be if like, what if that's their unraveling of this? It's not.
That would be amazing.
It's not because that they gave them money. Well, maybe it is, but like they eventually, the courts determined or the market determines like, hey, Microsoft doing this prevented another large tech company from becoming in existence and doing their, having their own free will, if you will.
I mean, I look at Netscape. Netscape, same thing. That Netscape powered there were no defaults for web browsers. A new type of app at the time. It was humongous. Everyone was getting Netscape. and Microsoft, kind of killed that, but it took a while, you know, and but they were worth something. They got bought by AOL. I
Hmm.
think it was originally for billions of dollars, and now they're worth about 37 cents, whatever it is. But OpenAI is on a trajectory. I mean, would they have had the same rocket sled without Microsoft? I mean, yeah, honestly, probably, I guess, right? I mean, they would have had, you always need that, what's the term, sugar
Here's the
daddy,
question.
whatever, with the
Here's the question,
infrastructure.
and this may come out someday in a deposition. Is
Hmm.
are there internal messaging and email and communications at the corporate or the executive level where
Right.
they are scared of OpenAI becoming their own thing because it could be an existential threat to
Of
what?
course. But
And so
that's,
and
by the
so
way, this is one reason you buy a company.
yeah, no,
I mean,
I
you know,
totally agree with you.
yep.
But that right there is antitrust behavior because it's like, hey, we can't beat this company, so we're gonna buy. Look what it's the same thing as Facebook buying Instagram back in the day, but that was slightly different because Instagram was on a thing, but like OpenAI is not wholly owned by Microsoft. Microsoft now owns a part of it, and then likely because of these conversations is intentionally limiting their growth and trajectory
Yeah.
because it's scared it will hurt its own business. That to me is like that could be their undoing.
I mean,
And now it'll take a decade for that to happen. And maybe that's Microsoft's bet
well,
here is like, look, we gave them this money, and now we're just buying ourselves time to be able to get back into a position to compete effectively.
yeah. I feel like
It's
even if
wild.
this was fast track somehow, and OpenAI won, and this was unwound to some degree, it wouldn't be 100% right, but whatever that looked like at the end, I do feel like Microsoft would be okay.
Oh, I don't think it's going to
Um,
sink Microsoft by any means. Microsoft
yeah, I mean
will
their
exist.
fundamental advantages still exist, and they look. A lot of people don't seem to like it, but that's our audience. I mean,
Hmm.
normal people, again, mainstream people, whatever. They've integrated AI capabilities into everything. They've done a better job than Apple, guys. I'm just
Yeah,
saying.
there's but not by
So
their own,
we can
but
crap
not by their
on
own
anything, I
technology
guess,
though.
but they've done pretty good. So
When
I
you
don't
have the
know. I don't
narrative
know.
of I don't know if Microsoft's currently the world's largest company, but they're like a top five, right? They're a top five,
They
whatever.
they were the last time I looked,
Okay, they might be.
actually.
So you have
Yeah.
the world's most powerful and
Hmm.
valued company in the world is buying a stake in a startup, and that startup has grown so large that they're now trying to actively limit their growth through a restructuring that would be better for society. Is that anti-competitive
Well,
behavior?
would it? I mean, that's a
Or maybe
debatable
not better for society,
point.
but better for their own.
Um, yeah.
You know, they're limiting
I
their growth.
look. Nobody strong-armed OpenAI into signing an agreement. I just, like, it wasn't like we're going to put you out of business. They were like, we're going to partner. We're going to, we see the value in what you're doing, and we think what you're doing would be better with our infrastructure and our reach. And OpenAI agreed. I mean, I don't. Maybe someone knows this off the top of their head, but did they go to Google? Did they go to Amazon? That's the whole. That's everyone, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
like that has that kind of infrastructure. It's fascinating to me, by the way. So go back a year ago, ChatGPT partnering with Apple, and then the events over the summer where Apple was going to get a person on the board that was like a non-voting person that could see what was going on, and Microsoft was like, blah, 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 what's going on? And then Microsoft agreed just to back off from that role as well, just so Apple wouldn't have it, you know. But now one of the big outcomes potentially for Apple with Apple Intelligence and everything is just look, maybe Apple can't do this thing, further partner with ChatGPT, let users decide on their device that, because we have all this on device crap that is
Mm-hmm.
never going to work that great, but you can flip a switch and use ChatGPT. But please understand that when you do that, your data goes wherever it goes, and we can't, or we can't even control the results because God knows these things will hallucinate. But you know what? 90 something percent of people are going to be like, yep, I will do that. So maybe that's the solution. Maybe Apple becomes the savior for this company.
Anyways, that Xbox handheld